Welcome to Catch Outdoors. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modies. This podcast is about living and playing in the Florida Keys, a 125-mile-long chain of islands that runs from Key Largo all the way down to Key West. I cover my favorite sport, fishing, but also all the many things to see and do down here in the islands. Catch Outdoors, hosted by Spotify, also brought to you by your favorite podcast network. So kick back and relax with me in the Keys. This week's episode of Catch Outdoors is number 155. Wow. Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime, whatever, depending on when you tuned into the podcast, of course. I'm recording this on Monday late, September the 8th. This is actually around 8 o'clock in the evening. Let's see, only 2 weeks till season 4 of Catch Outdoors. Begins on September the 23rd. Hard to believe, but then not so much. I enjoy doing the talky stuff, so I'm in my wheelhouse. I mean, that's where it's all about, right? You can now listen to Catch Outdoors on YouTube Studio. You can also listen via Apple Podcasts on most any search engines, such as Safari, Google, DuckDuckGo, Firefox, etc., etc., etc. All you have to do is go to apple.podcast.com in the search engine, and then put Catch Outdoors in there in the search box, and it'll pop right up. At least I hope it does. It did for me. Let's put it that way. Let's talk tropical weather. After all, it's September, the peak of hurricane season down this way. At one point, we had as many as 5 areas that the NHC, the National Hurricane Center, was keeping an eye on. As of Monday, there are 2, and soon to be 3, I believe. They've been really wishy-washy about the third one. But there's definitely one, and one that might become Francine the hurricane, and it might be trekking its way up the Texas coast up toward the Louisiana area. So, I wish them the best. I really do. They're annoying. Hurricanes are annoying. That's pretty much the good news. But it's best not to let your guard down anyway. We still have some very nasty weather that can come in late September and into October, for that matter. We've had some pretty serious storms in October. So I'll be keeping my eyes open for that. Fantasy Fest is coming to Key West very soon, into the month of October. There was an announcement about the Grand Marshal of the big parade, and I put that out last week that David L. Sloan and Robert Abdallah have been selected. You don't want to miss this if you can get there, and if you can find a place to stay at this late date, you might be able to stay off island, actually. And maybe even all the way up into Marathon if you don't mind a close to 50-mile drive south to get into Key West. But anyway, the actual dates for the festivity are October 18th through 27th, but this is the kind of thing that books up months in advance for hotel things. But you might still find something if you decide you want to go. I'm not going. I'm staying here. It's all good. I mentioned this last week, but thought it would be a good idea to hit it one more time. Resurfacing of the Monroe County section of the 18-mile stretch, that's US 1, will begin this month. Actually, it's already started. This is taking place between mile marker 108.4 and 112.8. So that's basically, Jewfish Creek Bridge north up to there's a marina. Right where the county line is. It's going to be right in that area. It's going to be a mess. I'm not kidding you. It's only 4 miles. And I think they're going to run it all the way to the fall of 2025. So about a year's worth. Be sure to check for updates if you're traveling to or from the Keys. They're going to use Cards Sound Road as an alternative road quite a bit when US 1 is closed. And if you've been on Cards Sound, well, you know how much fun that is. That's a skinny 2-lane road with maniacs on the loose. Seriously, you just have to be really careful, but it's going to be a mess. So if you're traveling down to the Keys, you really need to be aware of that and double check your travel times and things like that. September issue of Coastal Angler Keys edition is out. I also mentioned this last week. Please pick up one and kindly read my article called Fishing Heritage. It's all about the importance of mentors for young folks when it comes to getting them hooked on fishing. You can go to coastalanglermagazine.com, actually coastalanglermag.com, and then click on the Florida Keys section, and be aware that they also have magazines all over the state of Florida. So you can, wherever you live in Florida, wherever you fish in Florida, there's probably a magazine there that you can get local information out of. Florida Fish and Wildlife updates released over the past week. The run of negative sightings of red tide is off. Bummer. However, one area did escape without an observation. Let's start with Southwest Florida. Over the past week, Corenda brevis was observed at background concentrations in one sample from Manatee County. So that's up the road a bit. In Northwest Florida, over the past week, Corenda brevis was not observed. That's probably panhandle-ish type. And then along the Florida East Coast, over the past week, Corenda brevis was observed at the background concentrations in one sample from Flagler County. So, rats, the streak has been broken. Snook fishing opened on September the 1st in most areas of Florida, but you'll need to check for your local closings. This is really weird. They added a ton of areas now, and it's really, really confusing. It might be best to get on the FWC fishing app, which has up-to-the-minute info on Fish Speak. You see, I love that app. Turn it on. I would probably set it up at the house if you're going to go way out because you need a cell signal. But you turn it on, it'll automatically update where you are and automatically give you the fishing rules for where you are right now. And that also includes out on the water if you have cell. It'll like I was really confused about snook when it said September 1st. I thought, oh, that's us. It's not anymore. We used to be over on the Atlantic side. We used to be included in the Miami-Dade and Broward, that area. Not anymore. We're actually in the Gulf now, which is bizarre since we actually have the Atlantic on one side and the Florida Bay and Gulf on the other. But powers that be decided that's where we are. So we don't open until the end of September. So just so you know, I did find it. I think last week I mentioned I had no idea. Well, I looked it up. So yeah, I think it's weird that the Keys is actually included in the Gulf, but whatever. Gulf Red Snapper seasons were approved and listed. I'm not going to read all the dates like I did last week. I'm just simply each week cover what weekend is going on. It'll be September the 13th through the 15th, this coming weekend, okay? 13th through the 15th, you can go out and catch Red Snapper. The 2024 GAG grouper season is open until the 15th of September. Hardy har har. So you'll be listening to this on the 10th, so you better get out there and get it done. Still can't believe that. But anyway, that's how it works sometimes. There's special bundled pricing on my previous books. You get all three of my previous books for one group price. The titles are What I Know About Fishing Southwest Florida, Bridge to Paradise, and the award-winning Take a Kid Fishing, an Adult's Guide for Introducing Youngsters to the World of Angling. They're available on my website at catchoutdoors.com. Go there, pay one price, get all three, and all three will be autographed. Thanks to those that have purchased. I really appreciate it. There are some left. Also, in the creative vein, 2 of my new songs have been released and are available wherever you might listen to online music. iTunes is where I checked, and they are up and running as of today, Monday, this morning. Happy Listening, Alligator Church, and Guiding Light. Let me talk a little bit about the origin of those 2 songs. Alligator Church was written back in 1998. Title's All Janelle's Doing. We went on a trip after we had first met up to visit her friends up in Lake Jessup, which is part of the St. Johns River up north of Orlando. And they took us out on their boat, and it was, I believe, it was like a deck boat or a pontoon type boat. A little history about that lake: there are approximately 13,000 alligators there, which makes it about 400 gators per mile of shoreline. It's a 16,000 acre lake. To say we saw alligators would be the understatement of the century. She made a comment, I was just like, something to the effect of, I've never seen so many alligators congregated in one place in my life. And she said, Alligator Church. And it's one of those things when you write songs, even back then, you make a little note, you put it down somewhere that Alligator Church, that's funny. Well, all these years later, almost 30 years later, Alligator Church has been released, and I'm really proud of it. It came out great, and take a listen. The other song, Guiding Light, that began in November of 23, actually. That's a more recent song. A 150th anniversary of the building of Alligator Light just off of Islamorada happened back then. It was called Reignite the Light, and we went out to T-Table Key for a big celebration, and what has happened, the light has been disrepair, and people were worried it was going to fall by the wayside. The Coast Guard no longer supported it. As of 2013, the Coast Guard basically turned off the light. And so the efforts have been made to restore it and turn it back on again by a group, Save the Alligator Light. And I was really taken by it. We went to this big thing, and people talked. We listened to live music. We had a blast that night. The Whelan brothers were there for a concert on the beach. So on the way home, it just went round and round and round in my head, and within a few days, I wrote the song. And lo and behold, it's out. It's just one of those things. So it's all about Alligator Light. It's all about the restoration of Alligator Light and how we need to save her. So check it out if you would, please. And hopefully by Wednesday, which will be the day after you listen to this, day after tomorrow, my first reggae tune will be out called Bayou Bay. That should be available by the middle of the week, I hope. I'm guessing Wednesday or Thursday. So I know it's up. I know I got a slip back from them saying, yes, we have it, and yes, it's going up. It's been approved. I'm like, great. So Wednesday or Thursday of next week. I'm really excited about this one. I've always loved reggae. I've always wanted to do a reggae tune. I took it to Billy at the studio, and I played it for him, and he was like, wow, that's really good. Let's do that. And so there you go. So hopefully you'll get to listen to it real soon. I also need to thank, while I'm thinking about that, I need to thank all the folks that have been working and performing on my songs. I'm on song 7 now. Finished song 7, I should say. Starting with Billy Davidson. He's a longtime local artist that's been performing here in the Keys for over 30 years. He just happens to have a studio and produces local artists here. And I got really lucky in a way. His studio is about 2 miles south of us on US 1. I got hooked up with him thanks to Janelle getting her hair cut. That's another story I think I've already told during the podcast, but Billy's daughter Natalie cuts hair and takes care of Janelle. And the conversation, of course, came up in the songwriting in my old song that was at the time called Key West Rain. And one thing led to another, and Key West Town came out. So that's the short version. Billy's played many, many instruments on my recordings. He does keyboards, guitars of every kind. He also has played dobro and done a lot of percussion, backup vocals, things like that. So very talented guy. And vocal harmonies, too, for that matter. We also did a whole lot of hand claps at the end of Alligator Church. If you listen to Alligator Church, that's each of us hand clapping, overdubbed 3 times, so to make it sound like there's a crowd. There's an insider information on recording. Daughter, Natalie, speaking of Natalie, she did the vocals for Blue Rendezvous. Lovely voice, absolutely wonderful voice. Bass guitars on all my songs are done by Jake Capozzolo. He's from Upper State New York. And the drums and percussions are done by a friend of his called Robbie Spagoletti. Spagoletti, yeah. The two, yeah. You gotta love it, right? Oh my God, these guys are fantastic. They've been at this a long time, don't get me wrong. These two have done recordings for a whole lot of artists and people all over the East Coast, so I was very lucky that Billy just happened to know them. They've worked with Billy for years and played music with him. And then there's Dana Keller on the pedal steel. He's without a doubt one of the best. He's recorded with Vince Gill, Ricky Skaggs, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Dave Mason, a lot of really quality artists and stuff. He's done a lot of sessions with people, and I am very, very lucky to have him do pedal steel for me. As a matter of fact, he is on Guided Light. He's on Guided Light. So But anyway, so big thanks to all of them. I know some of them listen to the podcast. Thank you guys very much for all the work that you've done and bringing my songs to life. And yes, there's more to come. We've got several more just percolating. Let's put it that way, percolating. Fishing. Yes, I went this past Thursday, the 5th. Okay, first I had a great time, and it was so good to be out there on the water. I cannot tell you the relief I had just to get in the boat. However, the winds were supposed to be 10 to 15, so no fly fishing where I go. The direction of the wind does not, I just don't want to wear flies in my skin and ears and whatnot. But the wind was considerably more than they said. So when I got up to the back country, it wasn't too bad. I had lots of places I could hide, but the trip back was somewhat brutal. It was blowing 15 and probably gusted 20 at one point. But I caught fish. Good tides, lots of moving water, with wind to help, of course. Went way up in the back country, back up in the Everglades. And saw a lot of great stuff. I think the very first thing I saw when I stopped the boat, dropped the trolling motor in the water, and started working an edge, this gigantic tarpon went right by me. Now, I got to be honest with you, that was a huge surprise. Up in this waterway, I have seen manatees and dolphins swimming around and the usual stuff, jacks, snook. But the only tarpon I've ever caught in there have been the little junior tarpon, up to maybe 24 or 27 inches. We're not real big ones. Yeah, they're fun, though. A lot of fun. So I look out off the bow right after stopping, and I see a dark object coming, pushing wake, and I think it's a manatee. And right when it gets to the boat, it swings off to the left and broadsides, and it's a great big tarpon. I see all the shiny, the sun hits the side of him. He's beautiful. 6 feet long, easily, maybe 7. We're talking a real tarpon. I have no idea what he was doing back there. I startled the bejeebers of it. When he blasted off, he left a tail wake like a manatee does. And of course, I had to cast around a bit, but to no avail. And it was a one-shot deal. I didn't see another one, but I was just so stunned because of where I was. The only thing I've seen back there that's really wild is like sharks and crocodiles. So it was really pretty bizarre to see a tarpon of that size cruising back there. I caught snook. Lost snook, caught snook, lost snook, mangrove snapper, some really nice mangrove snapper, jacks, and of course kudas. So it was a really great day. I only stayed out till I got out there probably about 7:30 in the morning. I stayed till 10:30 because I knew I was going to get beat up, and I did. But it was still worth it. All an artificial, you guessed it, Z-Man trout eyes, in gold, of course. The golden is really working. I don't think I'm going to change that for a while. With the pink shine gulp swimming mullet. That was the go-to. I could have left the house with a handful of jigs and swimming mullet, and everything would have been just fine. So it was great. I did explore one new area. That's where I hooked and lost a really nice snook. The wind came up late. It made it very, very tough for me to position the boat or to hold it or to work an area longer than about 3 or 4 minutes. So, you do what you can, but it was really nice to find a new area and to find a snook in the area. So I will go back. I will try it again. And after the bumpy ride home, I wasn't ready to go boating for the next couple of days. Man, I'm old. I feel it big time after that kind of nonsense happens. Let's talk boating a little bit. I told everybody I was going to throw a little boating into every one of these episodes. I think I talked about this once before, but I thought it was worth going over again. And I think it's been quite a while because I went back and looked at my previous podcast and really couldn't find it, but I know I did. And I know I've written about it in magazines. I call this onboard safety. I decided to do this after reading a couple of Keys reports over this past week from the sheriff, the FWC, and even a Coast Guard report post-holiday. And it was about some of the observations they had on the boats that they stopped to do checks on, safety checks. A great many of them didn't have life jackets for everybody on board, and some didn't have life jackets at all. And I was absolutely floored by this. I can't imagine somebody getting on a boat and not making sure that they have a personal water for a PFC, for every single person. It just kind of blew me away. But it's true, and I saw it in the reports. There was one boat that had 8 on board. It had no life jackets. Duh. What can I say? I really can't say anything other than you really are dumb. You really should probably put some life jackets on the boat, if nothing else. Yeah, and then there was one that had I think there were 6 people on board. They had 5. That's what it was. 6 people with 5 jackets. That's what it was. And I thought, well, somebody's going down with the ship. Anyway, here's a rundown of the essential and required stuff on powered vessels from 16 to 26 feet. Okay, if your boat falls within it, generally outboards. Some inboards are included, but mostly outboards. 1 approved type 1, 2, or 3 life jacket for each person on board or being towed on water skis, etc. In addition, 1 throwable type 4 device. That's that cushion that's got the little handles hanging off the side, so you throw it to somebody that falls in the water and then get a life jacket to them. These must be USCG approved. They must be in serviceable condition and must be properly stored. And when they say properly stored, well, you can get to them in a hurry. They will gig you if you have your stuff buried in the bottom of a locker somewhere with stuff on top of it. So make sure you have your throw cushion available for delivery. Note, a Type 5 hybrid may be substituted for any Type 1, 2, or 3 device, but it must actually be worn whenever the vessel is underway and the person is not in the cabin or other enclosed area. Interesting. That's basically a ski vest. Let's see, what else? Just so you know, little kids in the state of Florida, 6 years or under, have to have on life jackets, okay, when the boat's underway. Fire extinguisher, you got to have one of those. It's a B1 fire extinguisher. That goes for every single boat that has a motor on it. From 16 to 26 feet. If you go over 26 feet up into 40 feet, you have to have 2 fire extinguishers on board. And it's a specific type for fighting fires on a boat, so be aware of that. It's not just, don't just go to the store, hardware store, and buy a fire extinguisher like for the kitchen. That's not going to fly. And it has to be USCG approved too. We're just got to throw that out there for you. Visual distress signals, those are flares. You got to have them. You need both for coastal waters and for high sea waters. So what they mean is offshore and near shore. You have to have some form of flare system on the boat. Those are easy to come by. I've got one of those pistols that you load. Just stick it in the pistol and fire it in the air. Sounding device, you got to have a bell, whistle, horn, something that can be heard for 2 miles. Yikes. What else is on the list here? I think that covers. That's the essentials. You have to have a backfire flame controller. That's for inboard engines. You have to have ventilation for inboard engines. You don't see that much anymore because people are so busy putting outboards, even on bigger boats now. Vessel lighting. You have to have vessel lighting. That's your navigation lights on the front and your white light, your running light on the stern. Recommendations. You should equip your boat with an anchor, whether you're going to use it or not, and enough anchor line to anchor up when you get in trouble. You know, when you break down, your boat's going to continue to drift. If you can anchor in some way and then give somebody a GPS location, you'll actually be there when they get there. If you don't do that, there's no telling where you're going to wind up thanks to tide and wind. So please keep that in mind. It's always good to have an anchor line and an anchor on board. I like this, a dewatering device, they call it, or a bilge of some sort, a high-end pump bilge, a bucket, whatever you can to take water out in case you're flooding. And then if all else fails, a paddle. I always laugh at that because you'd really have to be close to shore for that to make any kind of sense at all. But you know, why not? So I'm going to add this. This is important to me. There's this little device called an EPIRB, EPIRB, Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon. That was on a test I took once. They used to be expensive, but not now so much, especially if you compare it to the price of fuel or loading up with bait and ice and feeding people and all that kind of stuff. I was able to find the Model 400, which is their most basic model, for $299 online. And it normally sells for $389, so a lot of places have that on sale for $299. And I think that's worth your life, obviously. And everybody else on board. All an EPIRB does is it sends up an emergency signal satellite-wise, and it will automatically be responded to. That's something to warn you about. Don't set it off by accident. If you're in trouble out there and you set that off, somebody's coming, and they're going to come right to where they saw the service come up and right where they saw the GPS numbers pop. So keep it in mind. But I think it's well worth it. I think everybody that boats offshore, especially, and even inshore, out of sight of land and out of sight of civilization, should have one. I had it on the kayak, because I was kayaking in places that I'd be hard to find, and it's a great idea to put an EPIRB on there. Fishing tips. I made a note of this. I thought each week I'd give you a fishing tip, but this one was more tongue-in-cheek than anything else. I wrote, never give up. There's always one more cast, right? I've spent a great deal of time on the water, much more than most, and I know I'm a lucky guy. And, just never give up. I've always worked everything I can possibly work, even the areas that don't look that great. I'll still try it, and sometimes I get the nicest surprise of all. Pay attention to the water. Pay attention to movement on the water. Pay attention to tides and wind direction and any type of current that you see. If you go into an area and the leaves are lying on the water and they ain't doing nothing, they're not twirling, they're not moving, they're just sitting there, that's probably not a good place to start. Try to find a place where your observations tell you that fish might be there, that they might be moving around. You see a lot of mullet in the water, just things. I like to watch for birds. If I see birds working an edge, snowy egrets, tricolors, little blue heron, little blue egrets, the guys that are right on the mangrove edges, find those. You'll probably find fish there because what they're doing is they're sitting there hitting bait that swims by. And so that's a good place to look. So use your eyes, but more importantly, never give up. Always go the extra mile and just keep trying. You'd be surprised. I've had mornings where I fished for a couple of hours without a bite. And that can really put you off. You're psyched up, right? You've been thinking about this for the night before, maybe 2 nights before. You've been getting ready to go. And you get out there and you work the water for 2 hours and it's like nothing. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? Don't give up. Just keep moving along. It'll happen. It almost always does. And then when it does, make the mental note or write it down. Where were you? What happened? When did it happen? And what were the general circumstances surrounding it? Water temp, wind direction, things like that. And pretty soon you'll have a pretty good mental idea of exactly what's going on out there. So there's your fishing tip for the week. Oh my, this one went by really fast after last week's long one. It's time for useless information, so stand by.
And now, from the original book of useless information.
You are a reject! You are useless! You can get a job down here cleaning toilets!
Here's your host, Captain Rob Modies.
Well, he swears up and down he's useless, but
he might be all right eventually, but completely useless.
With useless information.
Okay, let's see. This was randomly selected stuff. I just opened the book and kind of pointed. German chemist Henning Brand discovered phosphorus while he was examining urine. Sounds like a great job. All organic compounds contain carbon. That's like Science 101. Almost all the helium that exists in the world today is from natural gas wells in the United States. I did not know that. DuPont is the world's largest chemical company. Guess what? They make fishing lines, fly lines, as well as many, many other products. So I guess I have to be somewhat of a DuPont fan. And there you go for this week. And as usual, I'm going to throw some final words out there for you before I go. It's getting colder up north. I checked a few cities north of Tennessee and found a good many of them are having nights in the high 40s. Oh my, and days in the 60s. Sounds kind of nice, actually, considering we were still here in the 90s with heat indexes of 109 to 110. So I think I could do one day of that, but not very long. But, I know what comes next. So, because I lived up there for a while, and I have absolutely no desire to do that again. Winter's coming. I can't wait for it down here in the Keys. Nights in the 60s. days close to 80, almost no humidity. Funny that I now actually look forward to winter. That's pretty bizarre. I hope all of you have a great week. Go play if you can outside, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed listening, please tell a friend, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors. Website's catchyyououtdoors.com, where you can find all the previous podcasts and a schedule of what's to come. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.